Afternoon and welcome to the afternoon exercises of Harvard University's 367th commencement. This afternoon we are attending the 149th meeting of the Harvard Alumni Association. My name is Nancy Sensabaugh. I'm a member of the Harvard College class of 1976 and Harvard Business School 1978. It is my honor to be here today with my co-host, Bill Horton. Bill, it's a beautiful day here in Cambridge.
It is. It's a beautiful afternoon, and today as we welcome the men and women of the 2018 class of 2018 to the Harvard group of Harvard alumni, it's a special feeling, Nancy. We've got the morning was beautiful, the afternoon was beautiful. We have now parents as well as siblings moving amongst the crowd with their graduates, and we're going to have a wonderful opportunity for people to commune after the formality of the commencement this morning. And there are 14 different reunion classes that are meeting today, and including the class of 1948, which is celebrating its 70th reunion, and a number of those people are in town. And the 25th reunion class, always one of the focuses for a reunion, is here, and it's the class of 1993. And they've chosen Gina Raimondo, the governor of the state of Rhode Island, as their chief marshal, and she will lead the alumni festivities today. Maybe, Nancy, fill us in a little bit on the history of Harvard College.
Harvard College was founded in 1636, right here on this spot in Cambridge. It was founded to train ministers for the colony, and but it wasn't until 1638 that the university had funds to pay scholars. The reason they got those funds was John Harvard was a minister in Charlestown. He had trained at Cambridge University in England. He died and left half of his fortune and all of his books to the new college, as it was called then. And in gratitude for these funds, the college elders decided to name the college Harvard College. These festival rites have been taking place since 1642, right here on this spot. If you're wondering why, if a college was started in 1638, that this is only the 367th commencement, it's because the first 4 years of the college, from 1638 to 1642, none of the scholars had done sufficient work to graduate. So 1642 was the first year of commencement. There were 9 graduates that year, and then in 1643, again, there were no one was ready to graduate, and then again in 1644. During the American Revolution, Continental troops were housed in Harvard Yard, and so there were no the college was basically closed. They didn't have another commencement until 1781. So, Bill, that's why, even though this is Harvard's 380th year, it's only our 367th commencement.
Makes a lot of sense, and I think when it all first started, many of the Puritan leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony had been trained as ministers at Cambridge University in England, and they insisted that it was critical to the foundation of the Puritan colony that there be a college in Massachusetts to train ministers for the colonists and their children. So that's where it all started. The genesis that led us to 1642. And the first commencement exercises. Now, in the early years of the college, the officials of the colony, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, were worried that the college might not survive. So each time each year, the graduates' orations at the time of commencement, politicians, ministers, merchants, farmers, other elders of the colony would travel to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to celebrate with the graduates, listen to their speeches, debates, orations, and join in their feasts and athletic contests. It was a way for the leaders of the colony to show their support for the young college and their graduates, a way of tying it all together. Alumni were invited to attend as well, and as of the 17th century, Harvard alumni soon outnumbered the other guests at this annual celebration of the joy of learning, as we saw this morning. And what was your estimate this morning of the attendance?
Yes, we've estimated this morning that there were between 35,000 and 40,000 attendees to the ceremonies. One of the reasons is it's such a beautiful day today, and we had our graduates. We had the 6,900 students who had completed their requirements for study, as well as their families were here, as well as people from the reunion classes and other alumni from the region who attended Harvard Commencement this morning. Bill, maybe you can tell us about what we can expect this afternoon during our meeting.
Well, during the afternoon, it's really the annual meeting of the Harvard Alumni Association. So it will be kicked off by the president of the Harvard Alumni Association, Susan Morris Novick, who's the class of 1985, who served for the last year, and this will be her final event as president. She will give her remarks. She'll introduce the chief marshal, Gina Raimondo, and announce, importantly, the election results for HAA director and overseer.
Bill, if I could interrupt, we see
Sure.
in front of the John Harvard statue, we see the beginning of the Alumni Procession. So
Right.
there's on the screen to the right of the white building, you'll see the statue of John Harvard. Interestingly enough, there is no likeness of John Harvard extant. This statue was created by Daniel Chester French. The date on the statue is 1638, again, because that was the year of his bequest. It was not the year of the founding of Harvard. But Daniel Chester French, the noted 19th century Harvard graduate and sculptor, is the one who sculpted that, and he basically found a model and made the statue. Now, as you know, Bill, what students do is when they walk by the statue is they rub the toe. So of John Harvard, so if you the toe of his shoe. So if you go by the statue, you'll see most of it is kind of a dull brown, except for the tips of his shoes, which is shiny bronze because of all the rubbing of the various that students have done.
Right, and I think you might hear in the background the Harvard Band has started to play, which signals the collection of all the alumni, and they're starting to march into the Tercentenary Theater right now as a way to kick off the procession of our alumni. And it's always added to me a sense of the festivity to have the Harvard Band play, because they play at football games and basketball games and hockey games and other events. And I had a chance to see them last night as well, performing in a concert here in Tercentenary Theater. This is a great moment when our alumni have assembled in the old yard, and now we can see the band now marching in, and we'll hear a number of different Harvard songs from them.
What you see on your screen now are the seats in the Tercentenary Theater, and if you can look way in the background, you might be able to see the band beginning to come forward and beginning to serenade the procession which is forming there. Now you can see the band in the background.
Right, and they turn the corner at the steps of Widener Library too. That's what we can see in the background.
And they're marching down the center aisle right now. You can see them in their crimson jackets. This Harvard Band is somewhat the antithesis. Bill, I come from Ohio, where Ohio State is the best band in the land, and they practice hours and hours every day. The Harvard Band is much more serious students who would like to play an instrument in their spare time. So it's much more casual, but no less fervent than other bands you might know about.
Sure. Now, as the band gets a little louder, I'll continue with the proceedings that we should set people up to expect. And that is that after the announcements of the election for overseer and Harvard HAA director are made, the band will perform, and then we'll have the presentation of the Harvard medals made by the president of Harvard University. So 3 of our distinguished alumna will be presented with Harvard medals today. We'll go into some more depth on the background for that. And then, importantly, the commencement speaker today, John Lewis. And again, we'll give some more background on John Lewis for those who aren't familiar. He will give his commencement address. Having received an honorary degree in 2012, he is giving an address today for us. We'll end up with a report from President Drew Faust, who will give her report to the alumni, and this will be her final report to alumni, as we will welcome on July 1st Lawrence Bacow as the new president of Harvard, and thank Drew Gilpin Faust for her 11 years of service to the university. And we'll all end by singing Fair Harvard, and the assembly will then disperse.
Thank you, Bill. As we watch the band march in, you may have noticed the various banners that festoon the trees in Harvard Yard. These are banners from both the undergraduate dormitories, which we call houses, as well as from the various schools of Harvard. So to your right on the screen, we see, let's see, which one is that? To the left is the one with the rook. Which one has the rook? The dental school.
Yes.
To the right, it is, that looks like
the Divinity School.
The Divinity School. And then if you look around at some of the others, we have the various houses. We have Leverett House. We have Winthrop House. Interestingly, Bill, I don't know if you know this, but the Harvard undergraduate houses are named after former presidents of Harvard, and they chose them successively until they got to a man by the name of Samuel Hoar, H-O-A-R, and Harvard decided in its wisdom not to have a house called Hoar House, H-O-A-R House. So we do like the decorative shields that we see in the yard, and on the screen, let's see, which one is
That's
that?
That's the School of Public Health.
School of Public Health.
School of Public Health with the cross, and now again we're looking at the yard.
And now we're looking at the yard, the Alumni Procession. The Alumni Procession is a feature of every Harvard afternoon exercises. And during Harvard's bicentennial year of 1836, the alumni festivities were particularly exuberant, as one might expect for a bicentennial. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the noted philosopher who lived in Concord and was a member of the class of 1821, wrote about the alumni parade in July of 1836. Cambridge at any time is full of ghosts, but on that day the anointed eye saw the crowd of spirits that mingled with the procession in the vacant spaces year by year as the classes proceeded. And then the far longer train of ghosts that followed the company of the men that wore before us the college honors and the laurels of the state. The long winding train reaching back into eternity. And here we are, nearly 300 years later, Bill, and we still see the long winding train reaching back into eternity. I don't know about you, Bill, but this passage always gives me goosebumps.
Well, you're right. It does for me, too. I thank you for introducing that to us, because Emerson conjures up ghosts and emotes for us a strong sense of continuity. And that's what this whole pageantry is focusing on, is that continuity about a community that's more about the people and the ideas than the time. Even Fair Harvard alludes to the phrase as truth on life's river floats by. So it's this sense of community that's renewed by convening in this place, the Tercentenary Theater. And I think here now we're hearing the bagpipes play.
And we see the banner of the oldest classes, the classes from 1940 to 1962, and we hear the bagpipes.
And right up the center aisle, we see the 25th reunion class being led by the piper. Looks like it's Al Halliday again, class of 1981, who's the piper leading the class of the 25th reunion banner into Tercentenary Theater.
Harvard actually invented reunion. So as I said, in 1642 was the first commencement, and the elders of the colony were so worried about the future of the college that they came, even those who had not graduated from Harvard came every year because they wanted to support the graduates, and they invited back the graduates in 1644 to come back and celebrate. And so actually Harvard invented the now worldwide phenomenon of college reunions.
And we can see what we just had on the screen, the class of 1926 is represented here today. So we go far back in that, and as we pan out, we can see that the chairs are starting to fill. And I think that this is an occasion where the pageantry starts to build as the band continues to play throughout the afternoon.
The pageantry, the excitement, and the noise level starts to build. Another of my favorite descriptions of commencement, Bill, comes from the dearly departed former university minister, Peter Gomes, who served the university for more than 40 years. And here is what he wrote. Someone observing the rather casual dignity of the day remarked that commencement is more like a lawn party than a ballet. and a less charitable but more astute observer suggested that the vast assemblage in formation in the old yard was very much like that wonderfully chaotic game of croquet with flamingos and hedgehogs in Alice in Wonderland. First-time visitors to this scene are rather horrified at what appears to be rank confusion, but then they remember that this is, after all, Harvard, where conformity, even of self-preservation, has been elevated to the rank of an original sin. That it works at all is a tribute to patience and goodwill and the general sense that, come what may, the day is to be enjoyed. So we expect a happy but chaotic scene this afternoon, Bill. And even unfortunately, we won't have what they had in the late 18th century commencement festivities, but elephants were brought in from Providence. I don't know why elephants were in Providence, but they were brought in from Providence, and people dressed as mermaids and mummies to celebrate commencement. I'm just sorry we won't see any, that I know of, see any mermaids or mummies today. Another little known fact about Harvard is that I am a resident of Cambridge, and in Harvard's charter, it is stated that any resident of Cambridge is allowed to graze his or her livestock in Harvard Yard. So one of these years, I'm going to show up with a goat and graze it on Harvard Yard grass, and it's completely legal, so the sheriff would not arrest me. And finally, I want to say that there is free beer in Harvard Yard today. In 1840s, when people were no longer coming to commencement, Harvard decided that a way to attract people would be served free beer. And indeed, in the old yard, around noontime, there is a beer tent. So you have to pay if you want to buy a lunch, but you are allowed a glass of beer. So that is one of the things that attracts people to come to commencement. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about John Lewis, today's commencement speaker, Bill.
Well, I will start by saying what we're seeing on screen right now. We just left the stage, and John Lewis will be sitting there and talking today and giving us his viewpoints as a long-time civil rights leader in the U.S. I think his history is well known by many, but he has represented Georgia's 5th District in the U.S. House of Representatives since 1987. He's the son of Alabama sharecroppers and is a graduate of both the American Baptist Theological Seminary and Fisk University. But he's always been devoted to the philosophy of nonviolence. And he organized sit-ins and segregated lunch counters and participated in the freedom rides that took place in the 1960s. And also is noted for having delivered a keynote address as the youngest keynote address deliverer at the March on Washington in 1963. And, in addition to that, he was one of the leaders of the March in Selma over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which ended in violence and is often known now as Bloody Sunday, and he in fact ended up with a fractured skull, but continued in his pursuit of nonviolence as a way to continue on and have civil discourse. He's among his many honors. He has the NAACP Spring Arm Medal, the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award for Lifetime Achievement, and also the inaugural LBJ Liberty and Justice for All Award. And to cap it all off, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So he's a distinguished American who's also made a big difference in people's lives, and we're lucky to have him here today. And I'm very interested, Nancy, in hearing what he's going to have to say to us today.
Yes, I would agree, Bill. We are lucky to have him with us today. And as soon as he emerges from Widener Library, we will have a shot of him coming down the center aisle. We're still watching the 25th reunion class. It looks like they are about to finish, and after the 25th reunion class, we will have the president of Harvard, Drew Faust, our corporation members, which is effectively our board of trustees, our overseers, as well as our commencement speaker and medalist for this afternoon, join us here in the yard.
Right, and we can see them collecting on stage right now.
Yes, we can see people collecting on the stage, and you'll notice the men are wearing top hats, and the women have hats, felt hats with feathers, and some of them even have fascinators. The Happy Observance of Commencement
Oh, what's a
Committee.
fascinator, Nancy?
Fascinator is a
Help me out here.
is a much smaller hat that is
Okay.
perched on the side of one's head.
So we might have seen that at a royal wedding.
You might have seen
Okay.
you saw many at the royal wedding, in fact. So again, in the 1840s, at the same time they introduced beer, they created a committee called the Happy Observance of Commencement Committee, of which I am a member, and Bill is also a member. And if you look on my lapel, you can see my name tag with my name and the Happy Observance of Commencement Committee, otherwise known as the Top Hats. So for the first 140 years of the committee, there were only men who were members. However, in the 1980s, the Happy Committee invited women like me to join. And men would wear top hats, but women did not have any kind of hats to wear. So one morning, I was supposed to be on duty at 6:30 in the morning, but my ticket said I could have entrance to the yard at 6:45. The guards made me wait, and all these men in their top hats on the committee, like me, got to walk through without a ticket. And I was bound and determined that would not happen again. So voila, I went shopping. I found this crimson hat to which I added black ribbon and black feathers, and that since then has allowed me access to the yard. So many women came up to me and asked on the committee and said, where can I get a hat like that? And I found a milliner in Jamaica Plain here in Boston who has now created the other hats that you see women wearing today. So the reason we have these hats is that we serve as the ushers on commencement. We know where the restrooms are. We know where people can get water. If anybody has a question, they can come to those of us who are wearing top hats and let us know and ask the question, and we will help them. So we believe that we do contribute to people's happiness on commencement day. It's been a big year for Harvard. Bill, maybe you could give us some of the highlights of this year?
Well, I think a main highlight, Nancy, is that we are celebrating today Drew Faust stepping down as president of Harvard. Now, it's not a highlight in the sense that she's a beloved president of Harvard, but her plan is to step down, or it's on June 30th, and on July 1st, she'll be, I'm pleased to report that Lawrence Bacow, also known as Larry, will become Harvard's 29th president. Now, it's interesting to note that Drew Faust was the first Harvard president since the 17th century who didn't have a Harvard degree. Larry Bacow will make up for that with his 3 Harvard degrees, a JD from Harvard Law School, an MPP from the Kennedy School in 1976, and a PhD also from the Kennedy School in 1978. So we welcome our president-elect to our celebrations today. Helpfully, though, and one of the reasons that we can celebrate Drew Faust is that she had a very straightforward approach to how she wanted to build the university. And that was to bring together the best students in the world and learn in an environment where they had the best teachers in the world doing research, but most importantly, provide people with the opportunity for a transformative event in their life. And I found it interesting, Nancy, that in her baccalaureate address, this is the address to the senior class that she made earlier this week, she had a twist on that when she said, when the senior class, the class of 2018, came to convocation, they were promised this transformative event, or the opportunity for transformation. And what Drew Faust said was, that promise might have been delivered on, but even more so, the transformation wasn't just in the person themselves, it was in the world around them and their effect on the world around them. And that is a profound element of what we're seeing today, is we're bringing alumni from all over the world together today. Over 300,000 alumni from all over the world. And today we'll have, and it looks like the way the crowd's filling up now, we'll have well over 30,000 people in Tercentenary Theater today.
As we see some of the dignitaries coming up onto the stage, I want to talk a little bit about today's celebration in the context of Harvard graduation. So Harvard graduation is really a several-day event. Yesterday, the day is known as Class Day, where the individual schools have their own speakers. For example, Harvard College for the senior class day had Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who's an author, speak. She's from Nigeria, an award-winning author, and she spoke to the senior class. At the Harvard Kennedy School, Ohio Governor John Kasich talked to the class, talked to the graduating class. At the school, medical school, Neil Bayer, a former director of the Alumni Association and a television writer and producer, was the speaker. At the business school, we have Carla Harris, and at the Chan School of Public Health, Mary Robinson, who was a commencement speaker maybe 25, 30 years ago. She was speaking because she has started something called the Climate Justice Foundation. At the law school, Jeff Flake, the retiring U.S. Senator from Arizona, is the speaker. At the design school, the architecture school, we had Paolo Antonelli, who is the senior curator from the Museum of Modern Art in New York. At the ed school, we had John Sylvanus Wilson Jr., who's the former Morehouse College president. And at the dental school, we had Laura Nasrallah, who is one of the professors. And tomorrow at the Radcliffe Institute, we will have Hillary Rodham Clinton as the Radcliffe medalist. So there are quite a number of speakers, distinguished speakers, and it is something we say here in Cambridge, that whenever Harvard invites you to come speak, you come. So we have the luxury of having world-renowned people come to talk to our graduates over the commencement period. And now we see in the center aisle, the 35th reunion class is coming down the center aisle. So there they are, 10 years older. The 25th reunion class can look at these folks and say, that's what we're going to look like in 10 years. But here they come down the center aisle with their banner. They will not be sitting on the stage. They will both be filling out the seats in the audience.
Now, Nancy, there is an element also on the stage today with John Lewis will be other of the honorary degree recipients who were presented with their honorary degrees this morning, which instills and gives them the rights of any degree holder at Harvard. And those honorary degrees, as I said, were given out this morning. It's a ritual tradition that started in 1753. And when the first honorary degree was offered to the eminent scientist of the 18th century, who happened to be an American, Benjamin Franklin. And, as Franklin took off for Philadelphia, where he made his fortune in printing and dabbled in science and invention and conducted his famous experiments with electricity, he continued on with a light that was significant for American life. And this honorary degree was awarded long before Franklin started his diplomatic and political career, for which most of us remember him today. 2 centuries later, the first woman to be awarded an honorary degree was Helen Keller, who was the Radcliffe class of 1904. She was awarded her honorary degree in 1955. And the inscription for her degree read, "From a still dark world, she has brought us light and sound. Our lives are richer for her faith and her example." So Nancy, as the buzz starts to accumulate in here, we're hearing the 25th reunion class on stage right next to us. It really is getting a sense of excitement growing. Maybe you could tell us a bit about today's honorands.
Well, before I do that, I just want to say it's always a thrill to think about Benjamin Franklin receiving the honorary degree for his experiments in electricity 25 years before he became the statesman that we know him for. And it's interesting to note that George Washington, our founding fathers, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, also all received honorary degrees in the 18th century. Today, we have our honorary degree recipients include Sally Watson Chisholm, who's a doctor of science, a biological oceanographer, and an institute professor at the school down the street, otherwise known as the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Rita Dove, a poet, a former U.S. poet laureate, and Harvey Feinberg, who's a former provost, receives a Doctor of Science today. He was a former Harvard provost, former dean of the Harvard School of Public Health. And Ricardo Escobar is a Doctor of Laws, former president of Chile. George Lewis, Doctor of Music. Twyla Tharp, a dancer and choreographer who founded her own modern dance company, received the Doctor of Arts this morning. And we had Wong Kar-wai, a filmmaker, Chinese filmmaker, writer, and director, who received a degree this morning as well. Bill, maybe you could tell us about our Harvard medalists, our alumni we honor today.
Great. We will have 3 alumni represented on the stage this afternoon, and being awarded the Harvard Medal for their extraordinary service to Harvard. They include Robert Coles, who has an undergraduate degree in 1950 from the college, Rob Shapiro, who's class of 1972, and also a Harvard Law School grad of 1977. And also Alice A.C. Welch, who's a Radcliffe grad 1953 and has been a tireless worker for alumni across the board. And I think one of the things that the Harvard Medal points out is that it's given to citizens of the university. So it's not just the college that we convene today, it is the university that we convene. And it's this Harvard Medal is very significant for these alumni who have really provided extraordinary service in their own way. Robert Coles was very inspirational in his work with Phillips Brooks House. Rob Shapiro, not only a former president of the Harvard Alumni Association, but also an overseer for 6 years, and very involved in the governance of Harvard and making Harvard really move into the 21st century. And Alice, or A.C. Welch as we know her, is a true alumni with heart, and brings many decades of experience to her contribution as an alumna, but specifically in integrating how women have been integrated into life at Harvard, into alumni life at Harvard, and it hasn't been easy over the years. And she's been a very strong advocate for how women have been joined together and representing women well within the Harvard community.
It's been an active year here at Harvard. As Bill mentioned, we had a successfully concluded search for a new president, Lawrence Bacow, who will take office on July 1st. But there were other events as well. There's been a 5-year capital campaign will draw to a close on June 30th, a very successful capital campaign. We've had a couple of new dean appointments. Bridget Terry Long is the new dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and Tomiko Brown-Noggin is the new dean at the Radcliffe Institute. Our Faculty of Arts and Sciences Dean Michael Smith has resigned effective June 30th, and there is an active search underway for that. And our own friend Tamara Rogers, the very successful Vice President of Alumni Affairs and Development, is also retiring at the end of this year. So it's a real year in transition. There was also significant construction in Alston of science labs and other buildings, other facilities for the future of Harvard. There has been a lot of discussion on campus about the new tax legislation that means that Harvard will have to pay $35 to $40 million a year of taxes to the U.S. government. So those are some of the developments of this year. I want to say for a minute, people often ask me why Harvard's commencement is on Thursday. Why isn't it on Sunday or Saturday like so many other commencements? This practice dates from about 150, 180 years ago, when there were sports activities included at commencement. And the Yale had their commencement on Tuesdays, and then there were sports activities on Wednesdays. Harvard had its commencement on Thursday, and then the Harvard-Yale crew races were on Fridays. So even though we no longer have Harvard-Yale crew races on Fridays, we've kept the tradition of having commencement on Thursday. Bill, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the Alumni Association.
Sure. As we see the groups now assembling, having processed into the yard, you can see on the right, or you saw on the right-hand part of the screen, now we're looking at the stage as the dignitaries accumulate there. Harvard represents a global network of over 350,000 alumni from both the undergraduate and the graduate programs. And it includes, with the Harvard Alumni Association, puts on reunions, class events, coordinates the class secretaries and treasurers, which are the representatives of each of the classes for the graduating classes at Harvard. and also the Harvard clubs around the world. There are over 180 Harvard clubs around the world that we encourage all alumni to seek out and join. And it includes clubs, as I said, all over the world, and it also includes shared interest groups, which are more a digital way of connecting now too, so by interest as opposed to just location. Continuing education through alumni college and travel is a big part of what the Harvard Alumni Association does, as well as doing video conferencing and seminar. And then an important part, Nancy, and I know you participate and I participate, and we hope that our new alums will participate, is in interviewing college or applicants to the college. And that happens as part of the process for the admissions committee of evaluating the students that apply, the high school students who apply to the college, that an alum interviews those students. And it is something that is has a profound impact on the community. And also we're hoping an impact for some students that are being represented well through those interviews.
Well, one of the things about the interviews that's so interesting is there were something like 42,000 applicants to Harvard this year, and every single applicant gets an interview. Right. So the alumni network of interviews around the world is absolutely critical to our admissions function. And the college firmly believes that applicants should have an opportunity to meet with someone who represents Harvard regardless of their chances of getting in. So it's really a way to introduce people around the world to Harvard. We don't know where it's going to stop. Every year it seems there are several thousand more applicants, but the competition to get into the Harvard College has never been greater, and it will continue to exceed.
Well, that's great. Now, if I could continue on, I mean, if we look at Harvard, Harvard as a global entity, it can't be said the sun never sets on Harvard. There are clubs around the world, and members of the Harvard community are actively involved in all sorts of ways throughout the world, building economic infrastructure, leading and participating in social welfare issues, fighting disease and poverty, working to improve governance. And that's what we wish for our new graduates, the ones we celebrate today, is that they find their place and their way to contribute. Now, Harvard has a specific program called the Global Public Service Month in 81 sites around the world. So this is an opportunity for alumni to specifically be involved together in providing public service. And I think the quotes about to whom is much is given, much is expected. And the other is that we are hoping and we expect our fellow alumni to go into the world and do good things, to create good things. So I think if we looked at that, none of us could possibly do these things individually, and I think that's the benefit of having our Harvard Alumni Associations, that collectively we can maintain and contribute to a worldwide Harvard community through reunions that we're seeing today, and we're seeing them exemplified today. You can see on the screen now to the right are the earlier classes, so that's going back to 1926. Or the class of 1926 on the right-hand side of the screen, up to the 50th reunion. To things that are more specifically public service oriented, which are Habitat for Humanity, Mission Hill, and other types of public service projects that many students became involved in as members of the Phillips Brooks House or other entities when they were undergraduates at Harvard.
We're right now looking at the steps of Widener Library, where the president's entourage, the president's section, are getting ready to come down the center aisle. Bill, I thought I'd say a little bit about Widener Library. Sure. So Harry Elkins Widener was a graduate of the class of 1912, and in 1915 he had the unfortunate circumstance that he had traveled to London with his mother, his brother, and his sister to purchase a first folio of Shakespeare. He had an extensive library collection. And he had the misfortune to come back on the Titanic. He and his brother perished. His mother and sister survived. In his will, he had left all of his books to Harvard on the condition that suitable housing for them be found, because there was a tiny library, but there were too many books. They were stored in various basements. So his mother gave to Harvard College the library that we now call Widener Library. There were 4 conditions to that gift. The first condition was that there always be a memorial to Harry. And so when you go into the library, you walk up the grand steps, there is a memorial to Harry with all of his books, including a Gutenberg Bible, and every day there are fresh flowers because he loved fresh flowers. Another condition was that not a brick be removed. When they wanted to build a passageway with the rare book library, they had to build a passageway through the windows. Also, it could not be any higher than the 4 stories that we see today. So when Harvard wanted to expand, they expanded underground, 6 stories underground. And the final condition was that every student at Harvard College needed to learn how to swim. So I don't know about you, Bill, but I had to pass a swimming test before I could graduate.
I did too. It wasn't frozen water. This was real water, and mine was at the Indoor Athletic Building.
Yes.
It is now the Malkin Athletic Center.
Mine was at Radcliffe.
Oh, boy. Okay.
And that requirement was disallowed when the Americans for Disabilities Act was passed in the 1980s. So that's the story of Widener, and we're looking in that direction to wait for the president's entourage to come forward.
But while we're talking about athletic activities, I mean, a lot of people have asked me, why do we call Harvard's participation in the league the Ivy League? And a lot of people think it's because of the ivy that covers the walls and that it's very distinctive and traditional. But the reality is the Ivy League started in 1876 with Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Columbia. And it was known by its Roman numerals as the 4, or IV. And that morphed into the larger group now, the 7 schools that make up the Ivy League that now participate in athletic contests and are quite active now in a number of different areas, and is an important part of Harvard's life, where there are 42 different varsity sports that are supported by Harvard, which makes it the largest number of varsity sports supported Division I school in America.
We can now see the president's group coming towards down the center aisle towards the stage. They're still at the back in front of Widener. There are a number of alumni filing in, but we have begun the procession from Widener Library to the stage, so the afternoon ceremonies will start momentarily.
Now, Nancy, you mentioned a little bit about Radcliffe Day before, and Hillary Clinton speaking. Is there some background you can provide on that?
Right. So in 1879, several professors, Harvard professors, as well as some of the prominent men in the city of Boston, wanted a way to educate their daughters. At the time, there were no women admitted to Harvard. So what these men decided to do was hire Harvard professors to teach their daughters. And they started an organization that was called for the Society for the Collegiate Instruction of Women. And then it was a couple of decades later, they decided to found a college for women, still to hire Harvard professors to give the same lectures to women that they previously given to men. They named it Radcliffe College after Anne Radcliffe, an English woman who in 1643 gave the first scholarship to Harvard. So in 1879, we had the Society for Collegiate Instruction to Women. And then a couple decades later, Radcliffe College. And then during World War II, so many of the professors went off to serve in the war that they decided maybe it was okay to have men and women sit in the same lecture hall. So they had joint classes in the 40s, and that after the war, they continued that practice. In the 70s, the dorms were co-ed. And by the 80s, everything was in fact co-ed. And at that time, in the 90s, it was decided that Radcliffe College should become the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. And Drew Faust, our current president, was the first dean of the Radcliffe Institute. So I love the fact that the first scholarship at Harvard was actually given by a woman, and we today honor that gift and her name in the work of the Radcliffe Institute. It is an institute for advanced studies. It invites scholars and artists from all over the world to come to spend a year at Harvard taking classes or experience any way we can. And now we see the the president, the chief marshal, the governor of Rhode Island, Gina Raimondo, the provost, the president, and fellows. We call members of the Harvard Corporation, our trustees, we call them fellows. So you see the president and fellows in that crowd, the chief marshal, the provost.
I think we get a sense in that picture about what's happening. There's an excitement starting to build. I think I can feel it now, being right next to the stage, and we hear the bells.
There goes the bell.
About
That
to
means
toll.
it's 2:30. We're about to begin.
So
Here they come.
So we'll watch for Susan Morris
There
Novak.
you see President Faust in a white jacket, followed by Mark Goodhow, followed by Larry Bacow, the next president of Harvard, and Mark Goodhart and Jack Rudin, the former executive director of the Alumni Association. They are coming up onto the stage, and as soon as they get settled, we will start the afternoon program.
Right, and the crowd continues to fill in. As this was, I said, it'll be alumni, including the class of 2018 in their first Harvard Alumni Association meeting, but it's also parents and family members who are going to join them here today. And I think we can see on the stage that we see Susan Morris Novak. I think we'll have it next with at the podium and preparing to start the meeting. And you can see now the stage as it's back. We can see how the Tercentenary Theater is filling now. And Nancy, it's really a sense of excitement sitting up here.
And just so you know, throughout the afternoon, we will have people joining us. The graduates, those who graduated this morning, went off to either their school or their dormitory in order to have lunch. And after their lunches, where they were actually handed their degrees, they will be coming back to listen to the afternoon speakers. So some of the students have arrived, but many of them are still to arrive. So throughout the afternoon, we will have people joining us at the ceremony. And I'm sure, Bill, because it's such a beautiful day, there will be, in fact, more people today than there usually are here at the commencement exercises. Because not only is it sunny, but it's the perfect temperature, must be in the high 60s. It's really, really, really the perfect commencement day.
Well, and it's a commencement, and not necessarily, Harvard calls it a commencement, not a graduation. And I think that signifies the true spirit of moving on. It's not, it's moving on and commencing in life. And it is one of those things that's uniquely Harvard, but it's important in how we have the continuity for our alums as they go into the world and they come back to Harvard. And now we're passing on to the class of 2018 that responsibility to carry on the institution of Harvard for students of the future.
There's 6,900 graduates today from the various schools as well as the Harvard College. And this morning they were all welcomed into the Fellowship of Educated Individuals. Bill, it used to have started out as a Fellowship of Educated Men, then became the Fellowship of Educated Men and Women, and now it's the Fellowship of Educated Individuals.
Right, we're seeing a shot now from a side view of the stage, just to give you an idea of all the regalia. We can see the top hats and the fascinators and the commencement hats, Nancy, your creation. And we can see people preparing, still talking, still connecting, and preparing to listen to John Lewis and to Faust primarily. And as we listen to the bells tolling of Memorial Church, which is the backdrop for the stage and is the bookend. Widener Library you described before at one end of Tercentenary Theater. At the other end is Memorial Church. And it's there the bells are ringing now.
And we can see Susan Novak in the white suit at the podium. She will be the mistress of our ceremonies this afternoon. She will be conducting the annual meeting of the Harvard Alumni Association. The first president of the Harvard Alumni Association was John Quincy Adams in the 1840s. And we like to say here in Cambridge that his service as president of the United States prepared him for his service as president of the Harvard Alumni Association. He was from Quincy, Massachusetts, which is a town just south of Boston, and he was a Harvard graduate.
So I think, Nancy, one of the things we'll hear throughout interspersed in the ceremony this afternoon, in the annual meeting of the Harvard Alumni Association, are the songs Harvardiana, which is a march that is now adapted to include Radcliffe. So we'll be able to see or hear that. And the song uses the name Eli to refer to athletic rival Yale. A lot of these songs originated in the late 19th century. And in the recent years, instead of yelling just Harvard, women are encouraged and, in fact, yell Radcliffe as an alternative. So you'll hear that when Harvardiana is played. We'll also honor the alumni of Radcliffe with the Radcliffe alma mater, and that is Radcliffe Now We Rise to Greet Thee. And also then to cap it off is Fair Harvard, the alma mater for Harvard, which has had over the years its words adapted to be more 21st century oriented. And again, we're seeing another shot of the steps of the stage where the dignitaries are now starting to slowly take their place. This is Harvard time, I think, Nancy.
This is the chaos that Peter Gomes talked about. So, this is par for the course. It's a little more chaotic today because people are enjoying being together and being outside in this wonderful historic
we
place.
can look out and see that sun-dappled group of people, and they're just enjoying the time to be together. It's a reasonably cool afternoon for the sun that's out, so people are going to enjoy it and enjoy the communion of being able to be together with family, friends, and now a new set of alumni.
Bill, I love the fact that on this very spot since 1642, the longest running annual ceremony in the Americas continues every year. There's sometimes people say we should do this down at the stadium, but I really want it to stay here because it's such an historic place and such an historic site.
Well, it is, and it's bookended by Widener Library and Memorial Church, as we talked about, but also University Hall on one side and Seaver Hall on the other. University Hall was the site of demonstrations, and this year's class of 1968 was particularly integrally involved in a lot of those demonstrations. They have their 50th reunion this year, and it was a time of turmoil, not only at Harvard but around the world. And it's interesting that today is the 50th anniversary of the first class to select its own class day speaker. 50 years ago, the class day speaker chosen by the students was Coretta Scott King.
Well, that was actually Martin Luther King Jr.
She spoke, right. He was chosen, but he was assassinated in April. And Coretta Scott King came and gave the address to the class day that day. And I think that's, again, symbolic that we have now John Lewis talking on the 50th anniversary of the occasion of Coretta Scott King speaking at class day. Interesting, though, as Martin Luther King was the first person selected by students to be a class day speaker.
We see a couple of the overseers there. Karen Gordon Mills on the right. I don't know who the overseer is on the left, but you see the overseers wear black and white at commencement, unlike those of us in the Happy Committee who wear black and crimson.
Right, and as will be announced during the meeting, overseers are elected. They're alumni who are elected to their positions, serve 6 years. And,
elected by the overall alumni body.
Right.
And now we see, there was a shot. Now we see John Lewis in the center of your screen, the Honorable John Lewis, Congressman from Georgia. And to his right, to your left on the screen, is Philip Lovejoy, the Executive Director of the Harvard Alumni Association. To your right, so to John Lewis's left, is Susan Novick, who will be conducting the ceremonies this afternoon. It looks like she's getting ready. She will raise her gavel and pound the podium, and that will signal the beginning of the afternoon meeting.
So maybe it's interesting to point out that Larry Bacow is on stage today, even as an incoming president, because he is currently on the corporation. So as a member of the corporation, he's an integral part of the governance of Harvard already, and was in fact on the selection committee for the new president when he was asked and then ultimately appointed in February of this year.
Well, as I understand it, the selection committee in their proceedings were so impressed by him, they asked him if he wanted to be a candidate. He and his wife and talked it over, and he decided he did want to be a candidate, at which point he stepped down from the selection committee.
Right.
So
And I
there
think
we see a good view of the stage, the podium, the dignitaries on the stage as we wait for the opening gavel for the afternoon exercises. I like the fact that it's here in Tercentenary Theater because this is where this is the academic heart of the university. So if we move down to the stadium, we would be in the athletic fields, which have their place in a university environment, but this being an academic institution, I really prefer that it be right here in this very historic academic place. And it's so wonderful to see 35,000 people celebrate the joy of achievement in learning every year.
And there's a great shot of Tercentenary Theater as the sun in the early afternoon
and that's the view that Susan
washes over the
Novak
crowd.
sees. Yes.
And here we are about to start the meeting. Susan Morris Novak, class of 1985, Harvard Alumni Association president, is at the podium, and looks like she's looking to start things off. Yeah, I think we're about to start, and she's calling us to attention, so maybe we'll let her take the stage.
Good afternoon and welcome. President Faust, members of the Harvard Corporation and the Board of Overseers, the Honorable John Lewis, members of the faculty, honored guests, fellow alumni, new graduates, friends, and family. Welcome to the 149th annual meeting of the Harvard Alumni Association. My name is Susan Morris Novak. I am a current resident of New York, a former resident of Mather House, and a member of the Harvard College class of 1985. As the 139th president of the Harvard Alumni Association, and in accordance with the tradition set by our very first Alumni Association president, John Quincy Adams, class of 1787, I raise this gavel and call this meeting to order. The Harvard Alumni Association warmly welcomes all of you who have graduated today, the college reunion classes, and all other alumni, families, and friends who have made it here and gathered for this very happy observance of commencement. This festive tradition began in 1642, then heralded as the annual celebration of the joy of learning. In 1867, alumni returned on commencement day to cheer on the new graduates, and we've been returning in celebration ever since. This annual general meeting of the Harvard Alumni Association serves as a jubilant reminder that every Harvard graduate automatically becomes a lifelong member of the HAA. As one of my predecessors has said, there are no dues and there is no escape. To our entire Harvard community, it is my pleasure to welcome you home for Eternitas. In the 382 years in which students have passed through these gates, Harvard's mission has remained true, perhaps best expressed in President Eliot's familiar inscription on Dexter Gate. Welcoming students with "Enter to grow in wisdom," the university has embraced youthful passion and idealism, shaped it with reason and evidence and experience, and empowered it to lead with expertise and purpose. Upon leaving the yard, thus armed, we are exhorted to depart to serve better thy country and thy kind. It has been my great honor and privilege to serve as president of the Harvard Alumni Association. We are 330,000 alumni strong, many of whom heed that call to service every day. Our work this year on the HAA Board of Directors has focused on the social impact of Harvard in the world, highlighting the many ways in which our students and faculty have done important, groundbreaking work through research, scientific discovery, and thought leadership. But in my HAA travels this year, I also discovered this kind of positive change effected by our alumni in their local communities. Alumni have provided disaster relief in the wake of tragedy. We have created thousands of scholarships for deserving students from around the world. We have worked to heal and to advocate, to govern, to create and inspire. In many ways, we are Harvard in the world, both citizens and ambassadors of this great university. At this time of reunion, we welcome new graduating classes into our fellowship. This week, our celebration of the class of 2018 coincides with the 50th reunion of the great class of 1968. The connections across time between one unsettled era marked by youth protests and our current one reminds us that the voices of young people have the power to change the world, perhaps now more than ever. In 1968, Class Day speaker Coretta Scott King spoke to students here about the importance of student participation in the political process in what she called your restless search for truth. She felt that students might be better able to see the fault lines between the ideals we are taught and the realities we live, and to act to remedy them. To harness and direct that activism for the betterment of the world was her hope for the future. Her words have just as much meaning today as they did 50 years ago, and we have much to learn from one another across Harvard classes and across generations. For many of us, Harvard has been the wellspring of many of our dreams and ambitions because this is where we discovered who we are and who we want to be. Our work toward these goals has infused the spirit of the HAA, where the whole is so much greater than the sum of its parts. I encourage you to stay connected to Harvard and to our alumni community in ways great and small. Our collective engagement and support of our shared values has extraordinary impact both here and beyond the gates of Harvard Yard. As our academic year comes to a close, the dedication of our alumni is nowhere better reflected than in the tremendous success of the Harvard campaign. This record-setting campaign has engaged alumni as volunteers and donors around the world. 125,000 households have supported Harvard through the campaign, and almost 20,000 alumni served as volunteers driving alumni engagement and participation. These gifts of time, energy, and resources give vital support to the people, programs, and educational initiatives that are critical to the university's mission. Thank you to all of our alumni for all that you do for Harvard. And now, as we rejoice in these festival rites, I am delighted to report that at least 4 generations of alumni have returned to campus to celebrate with us today. Leading the Radcliffe alumni today is Evelyn Richmond, the Radcliffe class of 1941, who will turn 97 next week. From the Harvard College class of 1941, Theodore Barnett, who will celebrate his 98th birthday in August, led the Harvard alumni this afternoon. Thank you, Evelyn and Theodore, for leading our alumni parade. It is an honor to celebrate with you today. Your many years of participation in the HAA are a great reminder for our new graduates that their Harvard experience is just beginning. I would like to welcome now our college reunion chairs seated on stage with us. This dedicated group of alumni volunteers represent 11 reunion classes and lead our reunion efforts for our alumni and the university. Today, we applaud a 50th reunion attendance record and celebrate the remarkable generosity of the 25th reunion class. Will all the college reunion chairs seated on stage please stand so we can thank you for your service? One of the important traditions marked by all 25th reunion classes is the election of the Chief Marshal of Commencement. Our Chief Marshal is a distinguished and dedicated public servant who followed her undergraduate degree at Harvard with a doctorate from Oxford. She was a Rhodes Scholar, and a law degree from Yale. A lifelong resident of Rhode Island, she became the first woman to hold the office of governor in that state. Named by Fortune magazine as one of the world's 50 greatest leaders in 2016, she has prioritized economic growth and job creation as governor with great success. She credits much of that success to her years on the rugby team at Harvard, which she has said was great training for a career in politics. It is my pleasure to introduce the Chief Marshal for Commencement, the Honorable Gina Raimondo, Governor of Rhode Island. And now, will the entire 25th reunion class please stand and be recognized? Stand again. They're a happy bunch. Let's turn now to our newest college alumni, the class of 2018. The Senior Class Committee, which throughout the year has brought its class together at several dozen events this year, is represented on stage today by First Marshal Berkeley Brown and Second Marshal Wyatt Robertson. Under the leadership of the Senior Class Gift Marshals, nearly 830 members of the class contributed to their senior gift. Would the class marshals please stand and be recognized? Thank you for your efforts on behalf of your class, and congratulations again to the entire class of 2018. Welcome to the HAA. On July 1st, I will pass the torch of HAA leadership to one of the Alumni Association's most energetic and dedicated supporters, a member of the Harvard College class of 2009, who has served as the HAA Vice President of College Alumni Affairs and is an elected class marshal, in addition to many other roles on the HAA's Board of Directors over the years. She has given generously of her energy and her time to the university, and I look forward to her bright and dynamic leadership. I know I leave the HAA in good hands. HAA President-elect Margaret Wang, will you please stand? On July 1st, another torch will be passed, that from President Faust to our President-elect Larry Bacow, who is here on stage with us today. As a holder of 3 Harvard degrees and a membership on the Harvard Corporation, we know he will feel right at home in his upcoming role at Harvard. President-elect Bacow, would you please stand so we can officially welcome you? We recently concluded this spring's elections for Harvard's Board of Overseers and the elected directors of the Harvard Alumni Association, and I am pleased to share the results. Our Board of Overseers is virtually unique among governing bodies of universities because its members are elected entirely by members of our alumni community. The election for overseers began in 1866, making it a tradition for more than 150 years. We are grateful to all of the candidates for overseer and elected director for their willingness to be of service to Harvard. Thank you to each of you who voted and participated. Please hold your applause until all the names in each category are announced. 6 exceptional individuals have been elected to serve on the Board of Overseers, and they are Geraldine Acuna Sunshine of Manila, Philippines and Boston, Massachusetts, Philip Hart Cullum of Gaithersburg, Maryland, Meredith Max Hodges of Boston, Massachusetts, Marilyn Holofield of Miami, Florida, Diego Rodriguez of Palo Alto, California, and Yvette Rubidoux of Washington, D.C. 5 of the new overseers were elected for 6-year terms. The 6th place finisher, Diego Rodriguez, will complete the unexpired term of Jane Lubchenco, who is stepping down 2 years early in light of other professional obligations. Please join me in congratulating our new overseers. Next, 6 individuals have been elected to serve 3-year terms on the Harvard Alumni Association Board of Directors. And they are Colette Crapel of Providence, Rhode Island and New Orleans, Louisiana, Sid Espinoza of Palo Alto, California, Natasha Reed Rice of Atlanta, Georgia, Krishnan Subramanian of Minneapolis, Minnesota, Bella Wong of Weston, Massachusetts, and Rashid Yassin of Nashville, Tennessee. We look forward to working with our new overseers and elected directors in the years ahead to help shape Harvard's future. Please join me in congratulating and welcoming them. To celebrate our extraordinary volunteers and our entire alumni community, please join the Harvard University Band and the Commencement Choir in their performance of Harvardiana. The words are in your program. 1981, the Harvard Medal is the highest honor awarded by the university and recognizes individuals who have given extraordinary service to Harvard. This year's 3 recipients, who are all with us today, merit this recognition for their exemplary and inspirational commitment to the university. Your commencement program describes the many ways in which the 2017 Harvard Medal winners have enriched the university with their service. President Faust will read the citations. I ask that each of the medalists please stand as your name is announced.
Robert Coles, eminent psychiatrist, prolific author, and beloved Harvard professor whose work bridges cultural and curricular boundaries. You have exemplified the pursuit of veritas in your lifelong study of morality and the lives of children around the world, cultivating empathy and inspiring generations to heed the call of service through your profound storytelling, your insightful teaching, and your dedicated volunteerism. Robert Coles. Robert Shapiro, alumni leader, stalwart volunteer, and trusted advisor with a view of Harvard that spans decades and disciplines. You have strengthened the university through your distinguished service, demonstrating a remarkable breadth and depth of knowledge, a rare combination of good judgment and good humor, and an enduring commitment to education as a force for positive change. Robert Shapiro. Alice Welch, with a firm but gentle hand, a bold but inclusive voice, and a resolute but optimistic spirit, you have driven change through your tireless advocacy for gender equity at Harvard and beyond, unifying alumni and alumni across schools and class years in common cause to expand and enhance opportunities for women both on and off campus. A.C. Welch.
One more special Harvard Medal to award. I am now pleased on behalf of the association to present a special Harvard Medal to Drew Gilpin Faust. Gilpin Faust, esteemed historian with a keen respect for the past and an inspirational vision for the future, you have authored a remarkable chapter in Harvard's story, leading the university forward with wisdom, courage, and integrity. Pioneering president and global ambassador for higher education, you opened wider the gate of Harvard for students with all backgrounds and deepened Harvard's engagement with the world beyond. Breaking new ground, literally and figuratively, you revitalized living and learning spaces on both sides of the river and fostered unprecedented cross-disciplinary collaboration between schools. You promoted experimentation in the arts and sciences, seeding bold discoveries and innovative ventures, and nurturing creative expression and humanistic inquiry. Through change and through storm, you knit together a more inclusive and diverse university community built on the conviction that every person here should feel that I, too, am Harvard. Please join me in congratulating all of our 2018 Harvard medalists. And now, it is my privilege to introduce our commencement speaker. The Honorable John Lewis has been serving as the U.S. Congressman from Georgia's 5th District since 1986. But his service to our country began years before then. Born the son of a sharecropper in rural Alabama, as a young man, he was inspired by the nonviolent social activism of Martin Luther King Jr., and soon rose to join him as one of the Big Six leaders of America's civil rights movement. At the age of 23, he helped to organize the 1963 March on Washington and was its youngest keynote speaker. At the age of 25, he led the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. He was physically beaten that day, but recovered knowing that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 would be passed soon after. Representative Lewis has embodied the virtues of courage, commitment, resilience, and optimism in his lifelong fight for social justice and universal human rights. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2011, an honorary doctorate from Harvard University in 2012, and the 2017 Gleitzman Citizen Activist Award at the Harvard Kennedy School Center for Public Leadership to honor his leadership in sparking positive social change and inspiring others to do the same. And he is still marching, with an eye toward educating the next generation about his own transformational journey. Many of the achievements of the civil rights movement are in no small part thanks to a man who demonstrated the power of one voice to lift the American spirit and one man to change the course of history. Please welcome the Honorable John Lewis to the stage.
Thank you so much for those kind words of introduction. I must tell you that I'm delighted, very pleased, and really happy to be here. You look good. You know, the weather is good. Rain stayed away, and I'm happy. It's good to see each and every one of you. Fellows, Harvard University, members of the Board of Overseers, members of the Alumni Board, distinguished deans, members of the faculty, and all of the students, all of the wonderful graduates. And Madam President, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for getting in good trouble, necessary trouble, to lead this great university. I want to take just a moment to honor the tenure of a great leader who, through her courage and vision, worked to lead this historic university to even higher heights. Madam President, thank you for being a friend. But more importantly, thank you for using your office to move Harvard toward a more all-inclusive institution. Somewhere along the way, you realize that the brilliant mind is not confined to one discipline or one way of thinking. In fact, true genius seek connections and relationship across barriers to build a new understanding of the world around us. Creating one Harvard is much like the work I dedicated my life to. Ever since, as a young girl, you wrote a letter to President Eisenhower. You have been responding to the cry for human dignity that rang out in our world. You used your vision, your talents, you used the great resources of this university to respond to the call. And I said, thank you. Thank you for your contribution to human unity in our world today. And I said to each and every one of you who have graduated from this university, you must lead. You're never too young to lead. You're never too old to lead. We need your leadership now more than ever before. We need it. We must save our country. We must save it. We must save our democracy. There are forces in America today and around the world that are trying to take us to some other place. Our foremothers and our forefathers brought us to this place. Maybe our foremothers and our forefathers all came to this great land in different ships. But as the late A. Philip Randolph said on one occasion, we are all in the same boat now. And we must look out for each other and care for each other. You're never too young or too old to lead, to speak up, to speak out, and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. You cannot afford to stand on the sideline. Another generation of young people and people not so young were inspired to get in the way. Students from Harvard, graduate of Harvard, Dr. Cole, who I've been knowing for many years, came to Mississippi, came to the South, and gave everything you had. During the 63 young men that I knew, Andy Goodman, Mickey Schreiner, and James Shaney gave their very lives while they were trying to help people become registered to vote. The vote is precious. It is almost sacred. It is the most powerful nonviolent instrument or tool we have in a democratic society, and we must use it. If we fail to use it, we will lose it. So during this election year, I urge you, I plead with you to do what you can to save and rescue America, to do what you can to save the planet, save this little spaceship we call Earth, and leave it a little cleaner, a little greener, and a little more peaceful for generation yet unborn. We have a mission and a mandate to go out there, play a role, and play it so well, as Dr. King would say, that no one else can play it any better. You know, some of you have heard me say from time to time that I grew up in rural Alabama on a farm, picking cotton, gathering peanuts, pulling corn. And sometime I would be out there working, my mother would say, boy, you're falling behind, you need to catch up. And I would say, this is hard work. And she would say, hard work never killed anybody. I said, well, it's about to kill me. We need to work hard. There's work to be done. These smart graduates will lead us. The high school students will lead us. And guys, I said to you, if you're not mindful, the women are going to lead us. It is my belief, it is my feeling as I travel around America, that the women and young people, high school students, elementary school students, and college students will lead us as part of a nonviolent revolution. And we will create an America that is better, a little more humane, and no one can deny us of that. I just want to say one or two words to the graduates. Take a long, deep breath and take it all in. But tomorrow, I hope you will roll up your sleeves, because the world is waiting for talented men and women to lead it to a better place. During the 60s, people literally put their bodies on the line. Many came from this university, came from Cambridge, from Boston, throughout the state and throughout America. Just think a few short years ago that black people and white people couldn't be seated together on a Greyhound bus or Trailway bus, leaving Washington, D.C. to travel through Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. We were on our way to New Orleans to test a decision of the United States Supreme Court. We were beaten, arrested, and more than 400 of us were jailed. My seatmate was a young white gentleman from Connecticut. We arrived in a little town called Rock Hill, South Carolina. We were beaten, left bloody. But many years later, and this was May 1961, the same year that President Barack Obama was born. But many years later, one of the guys that beat us came to my office in Washington. He got the information from a local reporter. He was in his 70s. His son came with him in his 40s. He said, Mr. Lewis, I'm one of the people that beat you, beat your seatmate. I've been a member of the Klan. He said, will you forgive me? I want to apologize. Will you accept my apology? Will you forgive me? His son started crying. He started crying. I said, I forgive you. I accept your apology. They hugged me, I hugged them back, and I cried with them. It is the power of the way of peace, the power of love. It is the power of the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. We need to create a society where we can be reconciled and lay down the burden of hate, for hate is too heavy a burden to bear. Stop crying. And I said to myself, we still have Bobby. 2 months later, Bobby Kennedy was gone. And I cried some more. Today, we got to get rid of our tears and not be down and not get lost in a sea of despair. We got to be hopeful and keep the faith and turn the ship, the state around. We can do it, and we must do it. Here at Harvard, you've been well trained. You must lead. You must get out there, as Dr. King again was there, and be a headlight and not a tail light. It's your time. It's your calling. During the 60s, I got arrested a few times, 40 times. And since I've been in Congress, another 5 times. And I'm probably going to get arrested again. My philosophy is very simple. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, stand up. Say something, speak up and speak out. When I was growing up as a young boy in rural Alabama, 50 miles from Montgomery, I had an aunt by the name of Seneva. And my Aunt Seneva lived in a shotgun house. I know here at Harvard, you never seen a shotgun house. You don't even know what I'm talking about. One way in and one way out. What is a shotgun house? Old house. The dirt yard. And sometime my Aunt Seneva would go out on a weekend, or Friday or Saturday, and take a brush broom made from dogwood branches and sweep this dirt yard very clean. One Saturday afternoon, few of my brothers and sisters, cousins, about 15 of us young children were playing in her dirt yard. And an unbelievable storm came up. The wind started blowing, the thunder started rolling, and the lightning started flashing. and she told us to come in. We went in. The wind continued to blow. The thunder continued to roll. The lightning continued to flash. And the rain continued to beat on this old tin roof of the shotgun house. And we cried and cried. And when one corner of the old house appeared to be lifting, my aunt had us to walk to that corner, to that side, to try to hold the house down with our bodies. When the other corner appeared to be lifted, had us to walk to that corner. We were little children walking with the wind, but we never, ever left the house. So I said to you, each and every one of us, the wind may blow, the thunder may roll, the lightning may flash, and the rain may beat down on our old house. Call it the house of Harvard. Call it the house of Cambridge. Call it the house of Boston. Call it the house of Washington, or Alabama, or Georgia. We all live in the same house. We all must hold a little trembling house down. So I said to you, walk with the wind and let the spirit of history be your guide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Lewis. Your living example, modeling citizenship as a calling, has been an inspiration to all of us. Thank you so much for being with us today. To honor the contributions of Radcliffe College and its alumni, and to mark its historical significance for men and women alike, please stand and join in singing, "Radcliffe, Now We Rise to Greet Thee." The words are in your program. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce the 28th President of Harvard University and Lincoln Professor of History, Drew Gilpin Faust. Although we have already acknowledged her extraordinary public achievements in the Harvard Medal Citation, President Faust has also connected to the citizens of the university in many personal ways. I was introduced to her as the parent of 2 undergraduates at Harvard College, and I was always struck by the thoughtful way in which she spoke to students about how to measure a life well lived. Beyond academics, she spoke about values and morals and the content of their characters. She urged students to lead lives of engagement and commitment and risk taken in service to what matters to you most. And in her memorable parking space theory of life, she advises not to park 6 blocks away from your destination because you're afraid you won't find a closer space out front. Go first to where you want to be. In other words, don't settle for Plan B until you've tried Plan A. We have been so fortunate that she has chosen the presidency of Harvard as her Plan A for the past 11 years, parking her car right here in Harvard Yard. It is my honor to invite to the podium Harvard's 28th president, our alma mater, Drew Gilpin Faust.
Thank you, Susan, for those very generous words, and thanks to everyone for a generous welcome. Heartfelt congratulations to all our graduates and their families for the hard work and many accomplishments that have brought you to this day. And I'm especially grateful to John Lewis for sharing his inspiring words and presence with us. There can be no finer example of how to live a life than that of John Lewis, whose courage and dedication, selflessness, and moral clarity have for more than half a century challenged this country to realize its promise of liberty and justice for all. It's an inexpressible honor and privilege to stand on this stage beside him. Almost 11 years ago, I stood on this platform to deliver my inaugural address as Harvard's 28th president. Today's remarks represent something of a bookend, a kind of valedictory, valedictory, literally farewell words. Valedictory, literally farewell words. When I spoke in 2007, I observed that inaugural speeches are by definition pronouncements by individuals who don't yet know what they're talking about. By now, I can no longer invoke that excuse. I am close to knowing all I ever will about being Harvard's president. But I then went on to say something else about the peculiar genre of inaugural addresses, that we might dub them, as I put it then, expressions of hope, unchastened by the rod of experience. By now, I should know that rod. In my mind, I hear Jimi Hendrix of my youth asking, "Are you experienced?" I would have to answer affirmatively. Perhaps not as experienced as Charles William Eliot, who made it through 40 years as Harvard president. But 11 years is a long time. Think about it. The iPhone and I were launched within 48 hours of each other in the summer of 2007. All of us are now so attached to our devices that it seems almost unimaginable that they were not always there. The smartphone initiated a revolution in how we communicate, how we interact, how we organize our lives. And we're only beginning to understand the impact of this digital transformation on our disrupted society, economy, politics, even on our brains. 2008 brought the financial crisis and the loss of close to a third of our endowment. prompting us in the ensuing years to overturn a system of governance that had been in place here at Harvard since 1650, and to transform our financial and ultimately our investment processes and policies. 5 years ago, we lived through the marathon bombings and the arrival of terror in our very midst, and we came together as Boston Strong. We've experienced wild weather, from hurricanes to snowmageddon to bombogenesis, and we've doubled down on our commitment to combat climate change. We've confronted a cheating crisis, an email crisis, a primate crisis, and sexual assault and sexual harassment crises. And we've made significant and lasting changes in response to each. We have faced down H1N1, Ebola, Zika, and even the mumps. We've been challenged, as well as often inspired and enlightened by renewed and passionate student activism. Occupy, Black Lives Matter, Divest Harvard, I Too Am Harvard, Undocumented at Harvard, and #MeToo. We have faced a political and policy environment increasingly hostile to expertise and skeptical about higher education. The unprecedented endowment tax passed last December will, we estimate, impose on us a levy next year equivalent to $2,000 per student. There has indeed been a good measure of chastening. But today I want to focus not on that rod of experience, but on what I then defined as the essence of an inaugural message, the expression of hope. Now as then, that is what fills both my mind and my heart as I think about Harvard, about its present and its future. These past 11 years have only strengthened my faith in higher education and its possibilities. Hope, I have learned, derives not just from the innocence of inexperience, but from the everyday realities, the day-to-day work of leading and loving this university. At a time of growing distrust of institutions and constant attacks on colleges and universities, I want to affirm my belief that they are beacons of hope. I think our best hope for the future to which we aspire. In their very essence, universities are about hope and about the future, and that is at the heart of what we celebrate today. Hope is the foundation of learning. The 6,989 graduates we honor today arrived here with aspirations about what education could make possible, with dreams about how their lives would be changed because of the time they would spend here. Dean Rakesh Khurana of the college regularly speaks to students about the transformations, intellectual, social, personal, that they should seek from their undergraduate experience. He urges them to articulate their hopes and define a path towards realizing them. And we do have such very high aspirations for them, that they find lives of meaning and purpose, that they discover a passion that animates them, that they strive toward veritas, that they use their education to do good in the world. Never has the world needed these graduates more, and I think they understand that. I had lunch with a dozen or so seniors about a month ago, and I asked them to characterize their 4 years here. They spoke of the ways they had changed and grown, but more pointedly, they spoke of how the world seemed to have changed around them. They worried about the health and sustainability of the earth. They worried about the health of our democracy and of civil society. And they described how their attitudes and plans had altered because of these changed circumstances. They no longer took their world for granted. The future of our society, our country, our planet could not be guaranteed. It was up to them. Their careers and life goals had shifted to embrace a much broader sense of responsibility, extending beyond themselves to encompass an obligation to a common good that they had come to recognize might not survive without them. I thought of these students as something akin to alchemists, confronting dark realities and forging a golden path that offered hope to themselves about their own lives, but to all of us as we imagine what these extraordinary graduates will do with and for the damaged world we offer them as their inheritance. It would be impossible to be surrounded by these students as they move through their time at Harvard without being filled with hope about the future they will create. To paraphrase the Ed School's campaign slogan, they are here learning to change the world. Building a more enlightened world is, of course, the fundamental work of the faculty as well, and at the core of Harvard's identity as a research university. The fundamental question we ask as we consider appointing a professor is, what has this person done to alter and enhance our understanding of the world? Perhaps they've revealed how the microbiome works, or how international trade agreements affect economic prosperity, or how undocumented students confront educational challenges. Perhaps they've unlocked ways to identify the actual location of genes that cause schizophrenia, or perhaps they've discovered how to engineer an exosuit to enable a person to walk. Harvard scholars explore history and literature to help us understand tyranny, art to illuminate the foundations of justice, law and technology to address fundamental assaults on assumptions about privacy. With its eye cast on creating a different future, all of this work is founded in hope of seeing something more clearly, of influencing others to change their understanding and perhaps even their actions. We are, by definition, a community of idealists, thinking beyond the present and the status quo to imagine how and when things could be different, could be otherwise. The privilege of interacting with Harvard's remarkable students and faculty and the dedicated staff who support their work has uplifted me every day for the past 11 years. It would be next to impossible not to believe in the future they are so intent to build. But there's another way that Harvard fills me with hope, and that is the way that we as a community, living and working together within these walls, are endeavoring ourselves to grapple with the challenging forces dividing and threatening the world. Forces like climate change, or the divisiveness that poisons our society and polity, or the undermining of facts and rational discourse, or the chilling of free speech. We might, in some ways, see the work we have undertaken together on sustainability as emblematic of these wider efforts. We've come to consider ourselves a living laboratory, Our research and engagement on environmental issues, of course, stretches well beyond our walls. Our faculty, for example, have played critical roles in forging international climate agreements, have engineered innovative ways to create and store renewable energy, have influenced regulatory frameworks from Washington to Beijing, have explored the searing impact of climate change on health. But at the same time, we have endeavored to make our own community a model for what might be possible, what we might hope for as we imagine the future. We've reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 30%, our trash by 44%. We produce 1.5 megawatts of solar energy, enough to fuel 300 homes. We have programs experimenting with healthy building materials, green cleaning, food waste, and we have constructed House Zero, an energy-neutral structure that is essentially an enormous computer generating data about every aspect of its operation and design, making information available to others as they build for the future. We seek to be a living experiment in other ways as well. We gather here in Cambridge, face to face in a residential educational setting because we regard this very community as an educational machine. I've often observed that Harvard is likely the most diverse environment in which most of our students have ever lived. We endeavor to attract talented individuals from the widest possible range of backgrounds, experiences, and interests, from the broadest diversity of geographic origins, socioeconomic circumstances, ethnicities, races, religion, gender identities, sexual orientations, political perspectives. And we ask students to learn from these differences, to teach one another and to teach us as well, with the variety of who they are and what they bring. This isn't easy. It requires individuals to question long-held assumptions, to open their minds and their hearts to ideas and arguments that may seem not just unfamiliar, but even disturbing and disorienting. And it is an experiment that becomes ever more difficult in an increasingly polarized social and political environment in which expressions of hatred, bigotry, and divisiveness seem not just permitted, but encouraged. But in spite of these challenges all around us, we at Harvard strive to be enriched, not divided by our differences. To sustain this vision of an educational community, we must be a living laboratory in another sense as well. We must be a place where facts matter, where reasoned and respectful discourse and debate serve as arbiters of truth. There has been much recent criticism of universities for not being sufficiently open to differing viewpoints. Protecting and nourishing free speech is for us a fundamental commitment, and one that demands constant attention and vigilance, especially in a time of sharp political and social polarization. The uncontrolled and uncontrollable cacophony that defines a university means that sometimes, inevitably, we will fall short. We cannot always guarantee that every member of this community listens generously to every other, but that must motivate us to redouble our efforts. Silencing ideas or basking in comfortable intellectual orthodoxy, independent of facts and evidence, blocks our access to new and better ideas. We must be dedicated to the belief that truth cannot be simply asserted or claimed, but must be established with evidence and tested with argument. Truth serves as inspiration and aspiration in all we do. It pulls us toward the future and its possibilities for seeing more clearly, understanding more fully, and improving ourselves and the world. Its pursuit is fueled by hope. Hope joins with truth as the very essence of a university. And so I come back to hope. The hope implicit in our efforts to model a different way for humans to live and work together. The hope in the ideas and discoveries that are the currency we trade in. The hope in the bright futures of those who graduate today. Yet as I step down from my responsibilities as Harvard's president, I'm keenly aware of another of hope's fundamental attributes. It implies work still unfinished, aspirations not yet matched by achievement, possibilities yet to be seized and realized. Hope is a challenge. I think of the words the beloved late crew coach Harry Parker once spoke to a rower, words I quoted often during the campaign. This, he said to the rower, this is what you can be. Do you want to be that? These are the words and the message I would like to leave with Harvard. The work is unfinished. The job remains still to be done in times that make it perhaps more difficult than ever. May we continue to challenge ourselves with the hope of all we can be and with the unwavering determination to be that. May Harvard be as wise as it is smart, as restless as it is proud, as bold as it is thoughtful, as new as it is old, as good as it is great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Faust. We are deeply grateful for your wisdom and your leadership, and we look forward to sharing in your continued scholarship here as the Lincoln Professor of History. You once advised graduating seniors as they embarked on their life's journey to carry others in your heart. Please know that we all carry you in ours as you embark on your next chapter. Thank you. No Harvard gathering would be complete without the singing of our school anthem. So before we close these afternoon exercises, please stand and join me now as we sing Fair Harvard. The words appear in your program. On behalf of the Harvard Alumni Association, let me once again welcome and congratulate the entire class of 2018. Honored guests, fellow alumni and friends, thank you for being here. Thank you for your support of Harvard. I now hereby declare the 2018 meeting of the Harvard Alumni Association adjourned to reconvene on May 30th, 2019.
We have concluded the 149th annual meeting of the Harvard Alumni Association as part of Harvard's 367th commencement. We had the privilege this afternoon to hear the Honorable John Lewis, a 16-term congressman from Georgia and a civil rights activist who's worked on social justice dates to his role as assistant to Martin Luther King Jr. and as the youngest keynote speaker of the 1963 March on Washington. Congressman Lewis started his speech thanking Drew Faust for her leadership, which he characterized as an ability to make connections and relationships across barriers. He exhorted today's graduates to be activists, to stand up for fairness and justice, to help save the earth and make it leave it as a cleaner place from when they arrived. In a voice that boomed and reverberated across Harvard Yard, he exhorted today's graduates to lead us to a better place. He asked people to keep the faith and to turn the ship of state around. He said that he is looking to graduates and to young people to save our democracy. Congressman Lewis was greeted by a standing ovation, which was also, and at the end of his speech, there was another standing ovation for him. Bill, can you talk to us about President Faust's final speech?
I felt a very emotional Drew Faust. She talked about hope as the core of the message that she was giving us, and she called them her farewell words. And that in her inaugural address, she felt that it was an opportunity to express hope without having and being, as she called it, unchastened by the rod of experience. And now she doesn't have that excuse, but she still brought on this strong message of hope that she has. I love the way she brought together and tied the bookend of saying in 2007, when she was inaugurated, within 48 hours, the iPhone was first introduced. And it puts in perspective how fast our worlds have changed since then. But the core of the message being hope, she sees universities as the beacon of hope for our society, that hope is the foundation of learning, and that for students, she wants them to find purpose, to find passion, find veritas, and use education to do good in the world. And she finds that by having talked with those students, and that she was uplifted every day with those thoughts. What fills her with hope, even in a community that grapples with threats to the world, is the fact that they're ongoing, and there are ways that she's approached them and brought together the community to address these. The residential environment, the whole educational system at Harvard is an education machine, in her words, and that the diversity of this place is an opportunity for people to learn from their differences. A point of the speech, of the address that got applause, was her line that said, "Harvard should be a place where facts matter." And she went on to say that the uncontrollable cacophony of a university sometimes falls short. She can't dispute that. But we should be nevertheless dedicated to pursuing truth. So in wrapping up, she said her wish for Harvard was to be as wise as it is smart, as restless as it is proud, as bold as it is thoughtful, as new as it is old, and as good as it is great. So I take from that, as we depart with the strains of Fair Harvard in our ears and the band playing in the background, we depart thinking we'll reconvene for this meeting in a year. We'll reconvene in the same place, with the same pageantry and the same sense of community, but also go forth in the world with the ringing strains of what Drew Faust told us, and that at the core of her message, and that is hope. We go forward with hope.
It is definitely a presidential speech that we will remember for a long time. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. To conclude our program, I'm going to read a poem by Seamus Heaney, the prize-winning former poet who formerly was a professor of poetry here at Harvard. The title of the poem is John Harvard Walks the Yard. A spirit moved, John Harvard walked the yard. The atom lay unsplit, the west unwon, the book stood open and the gates unbarred. The maps dreamt on like moon dust, nothing stirred. The future was a verb in hibernation. A spirit moved, John Harvard walked the yard. Before the classic style, before the clapboard, all through the small hours of an origin, the book stood open and the gate unbarred. Night passage of a migratory bird, wing flap, gown flap, like a homing pigeon. A spirit moved, John Harvard walked the yard. Was that his soul? Look, sped to its reward, by grace or works, a shooting star, an omen. The book stood open and the gate unbarred. Begin again where frost and tests were hard. Find yourself or founder. Here, imagine. A spirit moves. John Harvard walks the yard. The books stand open and the gates unbarred.